Hello friends. So today I am gonna take a live lecture. Hello friends. Today I am gonna take a lecture on matter and its composition and also include the law of conservation of mass. So first let's know what is chemistry. Chemistry deals with the study of behavior of matter. Chemistry is concerned with the composition, structure, and materials of matter and the phenomenon which occurs when different kinds of matter undergo changes. I hope the definition of chemistry is clear to all of you. Now let's have a brief history of chemistry. Matter was discovered at around 400 BC, and in the 4th century BC, Aristotle and Plato put forth their element theory to reserve the nature of matter. Before 16th century, all the alchemists were developed, and a new school of chemistry was developed where the alchemists were inspired by the changes in matter. Now what about modern chemistry? So now we come to 1661. In 1661, Robert Boyle studied the concepts of matter including elements and gases and their behavior. In 1774, A.L. Lavoisier ushered in the quantitative era of chemistry. In 1807, John Dalton postulated his famous atomic theory. 17th and 18th century, Henry Cavendish, Humphrey Davy, Joseph Priestley enhanced the developments in study of matter and chemistry. By end of the 19th century, atom was discovered and its divisibility into subatomic particles was established, which led the foundation to newer concepts in chemistry. So you don't have to learn all these by heart. Just to know what is the brief history of chemistry, you might learn all these, but you don't require all these won't come in the exam. Now comes the basic divisions of chemistry. Chemistry is a broad science with basic divisions as a result of its diversity. Now we can divide chemistry among many categories, but here are the 5 main categories: inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, analytical chemistry, physical chemistry, and biochemistry. The main topic which we are going to deal about in class 9 and 10 are inorganic chemistry and organic chemistry. So in inorganic chemistry, we learn a very wide branch which includes study of matter and of elements and compounds except for those of carbon. And the elements and compound study for those of carbon are included in the study of organic chemistry. So here comes organic chemistry. The branch is devoted to the study of carbon and its numerous compounds. Now what is analytical chemistry? The branch deals with identification and determination of the composition of specimens of matter, and for devising efficient analytical techniques and procedures for chemical reactions. So the identification and determination of composition of matter are dealt with in analytical chemistry. Physical chemistry. The theoretical aspects of chemistry are dealt in physical chemistry branch of chemistry. Now physics, we all know physics is a subject. So physics is used to explain various chemical phenomena, and these are included in the topic physical chemistry. Now what is biochemistry? Biochemistry deals with the substances and chemical processes which occur in living matter. We know the meaning of bio is life. So you might understand from the heading biochemistry that bio means life and chemistry means science. So all the chemical processes and substances dealing with living matter are dealt with in the subject biochemistry. Now what is matter? Matter is defined as anything which occupies space and has mass and can be perceived by our senses. Now the three important points are dealt and explained in the definition of matter. If you learn the definition of matter, you will have to remember the three basic points. Number 1, it occupies space. Number 2, it has mass. And number 3, it can be perceived by our senses. Now matter can be classified into living and non-living. And matter in any state is composed of small particles, molecules, atoms or ions. We'll come to know about all these in the later chapters. Now is the characteristics of matter. Matter occupies space, which is called volume. Matter has mass and weight, as we have seen in the definition of matter. The quantity of matter represents its mass, while the gravitational pull on matter is its weight. So here comes the difference between mass and weight of matter. So what is the mass of a matter? The quantity of matter represents its mass. It means the how much amount of molecules, how many numbers of molecules, atoms or ions are present in the matter represents its mass, and the gravitational pull on the matter is called its weight. So don't get confused between mass and weight. Mass is the quantity and weight is the gravitational pull. Now matter can be perceived by physical senses, that is touch, sight, smell, etc. Now for some examples of matter, we know for the living beings we know. And now guys, remember, in many books it's written living things, but whenever it is mentioned living, it can't be things, so it always has to be beings. So whenever we hear the word living, we have to add the suffix to it, as always beings, not things. So living beings would be animals, plant, human beings, and all the living beings. And non-living things are earth, water, air, etc. Now comes the states of matter. So we all know that matter exists in three states: solid, liquid or gas, and they are classified on the basis of difference in certain physical properties. So let's see how we can differ between solids, liquids and gases. So if we see, solids have a definite mass, volume and shape and are highly rigid. They cannot flow, have high density and are almost incompressible, and have any number of free surfaces. Now from here we can see solids have some properties. So what are those? Solids have a definite mass, they have a definite volume and shape, and they are highly rigid. From the word highly rigid, what can we understand? That the intermolecular space is very less and the intermolecular force of attraction is very high. So from here we can derive that they cannot flow, as the interparticle space is very low, so they cannot flow. Have high density because interparticle space is extremely low, and is also incompressible. Okay, and have many numbers of any number of free surfaces. Like in a cuboid, they have 6 free surfaces, but on the other hand, in a prism we see they have only 3 surfaces. So here they can have any number of free surfaces in solids. So these are the properties of solids. Now in what way do solid differ from liquid? Now let's see what liquid deals about. Liquids have a definite mass and volume, but no definite shape and are less rigid. So from the first point itself, we can make out certain differences, between solids and liquids. Solids are having definite mass and volume. Liquids also have definite mass and volume. But liquids do not have definite shape until and unless they are poured in any solid bucket or any container. Liquids are less rigid and solids are highly rigid. Now in liquids they can flow and take up the shape of the container in which they are stored. Liquids have comparatively less density and are very slightly compressible and have one upper surface. So if we imagine we are pouring water in a glass, so we can see the upper surface of the water. So that is the only surface we can see of the liquid. But if you say that we can see the layer of water, surface of water from outside also, those are not the layer of water. They are the layer of the glass itself. Okay, so it has less density means what? The number of unit of volume is less, hence the density is less. Now you can see the interparticle space between the particles of liquids are not Now from here we can see that liquids have definite mass and volume but no definite shape and are less rigid. Why less rigid? Because the interparticle space between the molecules of liquids is higher than the solid particles, and the interparticle attraction is also less than the solid particles. So hence they have less rigidity than solids. Got it? Now comes gases. Gases have a definite mass but no definite volume or shape and are not rigid at all. So from here we can get a point of difference between solids, liquids and gases. See, solids had definite mass, definite volume and definite shape, but liquids have only definite mass and volume at no definite shape. Gases have only definite mass and no definite volume or shape, and they are not at all rigid, because amongst the three states of matter, gases have the maximum interparticle space between the particles of gases and the least amount of interparticle attraction. So they can flow and take up the shape and volume of the container in which they are stored. But in liquids they can only flow and they take the shape of the container only. Whereas in gases they take up the shape as well as the volume of the container. So from here we can see they don't have any definite volume. The gases don't have any definite volume, but liquids have definite volume. Now comes the change of state of matter. The interconversion of matter involves state of change of matter from one state to another and back to its original state. Now, how are they affected? It is affected by changes in conditions such as temperature, pressure, etc. Now, this is the stage. This is a brief diagram which shows the change of state of matter, that we can change the state of matter from solid to liquid, then liquid to gas, and we can even transfer in the opposite way, that is from gas to liquid and liquid to solid. But one special conversion is also there. Omitting the step of liquid, we can straight away transfer solid into gas. How? We will get to know later in this lesson. Now, what is the kinetic theory of matter? Let us know. The main postulates of kinetic theory of matter are summarized below. Composition of matter. All matter in any state is composed of small particles, which are the molecules, atoms or ions. Now, what is the interparticle space? The particles are arranged in a way such that the spaces or gaps exist between them. Now, what is interparticle attraction? The particles attract each other with a force. The interparticle attraction decreases with increasing distance and vice versa. Energy possessed by particles of matter. Now, what are the energy which the particles of matter possess? They are the kinetic energy and the potential energy. Now, you might get confused between kinetic energy and potential energy, as I was when I was a student of class 9. So remember this, kinetic energy is always related to some motion, and potential energy is always potential energy is never possessed by bodies which are in motion. So whenever the body is standing or stationary, it has potential energy in it, and whenever the stationary object has converted into a moving object, it has kinetic energy. Okay, now see what is the definition of kinetic energy. The particles are in continuous random motion and possess kinetic energy. The kinetic energy of the particles increases on application of heat, and the particles move more randomly. From here we can see that kinetic energy always increases with the increase in temperature. Now, what is potential energy? The particles interact and possess potential energy also. So the particles inside the solid, liquid or gas possess potential energy amongst the particles themselves. Now let's deal with the three states of matter and the interparticle space and interparticle attraction. So first comes solid. And the particles are closely packed and can vibrate about their mean positions only. Hence, solids do not flow, are rigid and have definite shape and volume. As I said before, interparticle space between the particles of a solid is minimum. Okay, it's minimum amongst the three, it's minimum, because the particles are close to each other. Now, the interparticle attraction between the particles is maximum amongst the three, because the particles are close to each other. Okay, and now what kind of energy does the particles of solid matter possess? Kinetic energy of molecules in the solid is least. Okay, now see what the liquid says. The interparticle space, particles are comparatively less compact and the molecules are free to move within the liquid, as I said, but do not leave the liquid. Hence, liquids can flow, have a definite volume and are less rigid. Now, as I said before, liquids have a definite volume whereas gases do not. See, in a simple way we can give an example. See, if you keep an empty glass, the air will enter inside the glass and it will again come out. So you can't stop the gas from coming out until and unless you are closing or giving a cap on top of the glass. But liquid always stays inside the glass until and unless by mistake the glass falls. Okay, so the particles are comparatively less compact and the molecules are free to move within the liquid. Okay. Now, interparticle space between the particles is slightly more than the solids, which helps them in moving freely, and interparticle attraction is less compared to solids. Now, what kind of energy is possessed by the particles of liquid? Kinetic energy of molecules in a liquid is larger than the solids. Okay, now comes gases. Interparticle space and interparticle attraction of gases. Now, from the above two, we can have a brief idea about what the interparticle space and interparticle attraction of gases would be. Interparticle attraction of gases is negligible, because the particle shows minimum compactness and the particles are free to move in any direction, hence can fill any space. Okay, so the gases have no definite shape nor volume and they can flow easily and are easily compressible. Okay, so now from here we can get an idea what kind of energy will be possessed by the particles of gases. The kinetic energy of molecules in a gas is very, very, very large. Okay. Now let's see how can we change the state of a matter. From solid state to liquid state, we can change by a process called melting. Now, how to define melting? Process of change from solid state to a liquid state at a particular temperature is called melting. Now, what are the two important basic points you need to remember while learning the definition? Is the change of state of matter, that is from which state it's changing to another state, and at a particular temperature. Writing this point at a particular temperature is extremely important, else you won't get marks. Okay. Now, process of change from solid state to liquid state at a particular temperature is called melting. Now, we had learned earlier that solids have kinetic energy, have the least kinetic energy of molecules, and liquids have a large kinetic energy of molecules. And we had also done that kinetic energy of molecules increases with the temperature. Okay, so from here we can see on heating a solid, so when we give heat to a solid, its temperature is increasing, and if the temperature increases, the kinetic energy would also increase, and the heat energy is stored here as the potential energy. Now you get it? Heat energy is stored as potential energy. See, now here it's given at a particular temperature is called melting. So if we write process of change from solid state to liquid state at its melting point is called melting would be a more appropriate definition, but for your standard at a particular temperature is all right. When you come to for the classes 11 and 12, you will have to use the particular scientific terms. So now you might not use the terms. This definition is more apt for you. So now in which way is the heat energy is stored? Heat energy is stored as potential energy. The heat energy supplied to the solid is absorbed by its molecules and stored in the form of potential energy. Okay. Now, if the temperature is increasing and the potential energy is also increasing and kinetic energy is increasing with the increasing in temperature, then what will the interparticle space be? The interparticle space would also begin to increase. So, the state of matter would change from solid to liquid. The stored potential energy increases with the increase in temperature and hence increases the interparticle space. Now, know this. Interparticle space is always inversely proportional with interparticle attraction. Okay, so if interparticle space increases, automatically interparticle attraction would decrease. So, now what happens to the interparticle attraction? It begins to decrease. And what would be the result of the decrease in interparticle attraction and increase in interparticle space? The molecules thus become free and solid starts changing into the liquid state. Okay. Now you see the image of the solid over here. The particles are compressed and are compact, and when heat is applied to them due to the process of melting, or you might even call it fusion, it is changing into liquid, and now you can see that the interparticle space between the particles of the liquid has increased and interparticle attraction has also decreased. Now, if we see the opposite to this, now we would see liquid state to solid state. So what is this process now called? Solidification or freezing. So how to define solidification? Excuse me. Process of change from liquid state to solid state at a particular temperature is called freezing or solidification. Guys, listen, these definitions are extremely important and you have to write these definitions itself. You can't make up any definitions and write, else you won't fetch marks. Okay, so try to learn these. These are not so hard, so you will remember all these. Now, what is the solidification? The process of change from liquid state to solid state at a particular temperature is called freezing. Now, let's have the example on the basis of kinetic theory. On cooling a liquid at its freezing point, the potential energy is released in the form of heat energy. Remember this. Whenever the potential energy is released in the form of heat energy, the kinetic energy is also released. So the kinetic energy also decreases. The kinetic energy decreases, which means the state is changing from liquid to solid. Is it clear? Now, potential energy released in the form of heat energy. That is, on cooling a liquid, the stored potential energy in the molecules of liquid is released as heat energy to the surroundings. Okay, now interparticle space also decreases. The released potential energy causes the interparticle space to decrease and the force of attraction between the particles increase. So therefore, what would be the result of the interparticle attraction increasing and interparticle space decreasing? Can anyone tell? Yes, the molecules are hence not in a position to be free or migrate, and the state of matter which was in liquid starts changing into the solid state. Okay, got it? Now comes the change of liquid state to gaseous state. Now what is this called? Vaporization. So the process of change from liquid state to a gaseous state is called vaporization. Or you might have heard evaporation. Evaporation and vaporization are same terms, but if you write vaporization, it's a more scientific term. Now let's have the explanation on the basis of kinetic theory. On heating a liquid at its boiling point, and the heat energy is absorbed and is stored as potential energy. Yes, and the heat energy absorbed is stored as potential energy. So the heat energy supplied to the liquid is absorbed by its molecules and stored in the form of potential energy. So if the potential energy is stored, then what would be the result? Interparticle space increases and the interparticle attraction decreases to negligible. Okay. Now, what would be the result if interparticle space increases and interparticle attraction decreases to negligible? Yes, the state of matter would change from liquid to gas or vapor. Okay. So, you might see the examples, the diagrams given over here. The first diagram shows the condition of the particles in liquid state of matter, and after vaporization or after applying heat to it, and this is the diagram which you would see in a gaseous molecule. Okay. Now comes the vice versa scene of vaporization, that is condensation or liquefaction. So you might use any of the terms. Process of change from gaseous state to liquid state without any fall in temperature is called liquefaction or condensation. Now remember over here, guys, this one in the definition of vaporization, it says process of change from liquid to a gaseous state is called vaporization. It has not included anything regarding temperature or heat energy, or nothing it has included. But in this definition, it says process of change from gaseous state to liquid state without any fall in temperature. So you have to keep in mind at this point, without any fall in temperature. Many students get this part wrong. So keep in mind this part, because this is very crucial. If you don't give this point in your definition is completely incomplete. Okay, and now let's have the explanation on the basis of kinetic theory. On cooling a gas, the potential energy is released in the form of heat energy. That is, on cooling, the gas molecules lose their potential energy in the form of heat energy. Therefore, what happens? The interparticle space decreases to a great extent and the interparticle attraction increases. Therefore, what would be the result if the interparticle attraction increases and interparticle space decreases to a great extent? Yes, the particles would change from from gaseous state to liquid state. Okay, so see the result over here. Molecules come very close and hence are not free to migrate, and the gaseous state changes into liquid state. Now comes a very important change of state of matter. Now, many students do a massive big mistake in this part of change of state of matter. See, sublimation is such a process which changes a solid directly to the gaseous state without, remember this point, without changing the solid particles into the liquid state. Understood? This phenomena is not experienced in all the solids. Some exceptions are there. Exceptions are there in our surroundings. Everywhere some exceptions are there. So in sublimation, only some exceptional solids such as ammonium chloride or iodine or camphor or naphthalene, which we use in our day life. So these solids are there which convert directly solid to the gaseous state, not involving the liquid state. Okay. Now, what is the definition of sublimation? The process due to which a solid directly changes to gaseous state or vapor state, and on cooling directly changes back to solid state without changing into liquid state. Okay. The gaseous or vapor form is called sublime, and the solid state formed from gaseous state on cooling is called sublimate. Now, these are the two important points which you need to remember. The gaseous or vapor form, I am repeating many times, so you might remember these. The gaseous or vapor form is called sublime, and the solid state formed from the gaseous state on cooling is called sublimate. Okay, so see, a bigger name, a bigger definition, and a smaller name, a smaller definition. So you might remember from this. Now, what is the explanation on the basis of kinetic theory? On heating a sublimable solid, the interparticle attraction is becomes low. Okay. See, sublimable solids have very little force of attraction between their molecules and have high potential energy stored in their molecules. Okay. So, on heating a sublimable solid, the interparticle attraction is overcome. Okay. On heating, the interparticle attraction is overcome and the molecules break away from other molecules and escape from the surface of the solid in the form of vapor. Okay, you might have seen your mothers keeping naphthalenes in the where you keep clothes or woolen clothes especially. So what happens? The solid naphthalene which you see, after a few days you cannot see any solid naphthalene, but you can smell the naphthalene. Why is that? Because it's a sublimable solid. It's a sublimable solid. Why? Because it changes directly from the solid state to the gaseous state without involving the liquid stage. Okay. So now let's see sublimation in the absence of heat. Okay, sublimation requires no heat, as you have seen your mother never applies heat to the naphthalines to let them work, isn't it? So naphthalene always, I mean not only naphthalene, the other sublimable solids always sublimes at room temperature. Okay, sublimation can take place in absence of heat. So what, remember some examples of this, of these, ammonium chloride, iodine. Okay, these two are the basic examples, and if they want more than two, you can even add camphor and naphthalene. Naphthalene, the spelling given on the screen is not correct. Naphthalene spelling is Naphthaline. Okay, and camphor, Camphor. Okay. Now let's see what is law of conservation of mass. Let's have a brief introduction first. John Dalton. Okay, Dalton proposed in his theory of the atom that atoms can neither be created nor destroyed, but change from one form to another. Okay, hence matter too, which is made up of atoms, can be neither created nor destroyed. Okay, this was whose? John Dalton's proposed theory. Okay, so afterwards in 1774, Lavoisier, a scientist named Lavoisier, formulated the law on the basis of experimental evidence. He heated tin in thin air with air in a closed vessel and found that the total mass of tin and air before the chemical change remained unaltered even after the chemical change, producing tin oxide, provided the temperature remained constant. You remember this, provided the temperature remained constant. Okay, so you will come to know about a term known as STP, standard temperature and pressure. Okay, so let's not bother about that. First you know this. So he what did he do? He heated a tin with air in a closed vessel and there was no temperature change. Okay, the temperature remained constant. Therefore, the total mass of tin and air before the chemical change remained unaltered even after the chemical change, producing tin oxide. Okay, so before and after the experiment, the mass remained the same. So he proved whose postulate? He proved John Dalton's second postulate to be true. That is, matter too, which is made up of atoms, can neither be created nor destroyed. Okay. Now let's see what is the modern law of conservation of mass. In any chemical reaction, the total mass of the reacting substances is equal to the total mass of the products of the reaction, provided masses are measured under similar conditions. Now, what is similar conditions? Similar conditions means the temperature and pressure need to be constant. Okay, so you have to learn this by heart, and as this is a law, you can't make it up or write your own law. Okay, so you have to learn this law by heart, and you cannot even replace one comma from this law. Okay, so what does this law say? In any chemical reaction, the total mass of reacting substances is equal to the total mass of the products of the reaction, provided masses are measured under similar conditions. Okay, now how to explain this? See, if A and B react to form C and D, so the products, the reactants over here are A and B, and the products received are C and D. So what does the law of conservation of mass say? That the mass of A plus mass of B would be equal to mass of C and mass of D. So what is, let's take an example. So in the formation of iron 2 sulfide, by heating iron and sulfur, 56 parts of iron and 32 parts of sulfur chemically combine to form 88 parts of ferrous sulfide. Okay, so let's see the example. See, what is the mass of iron? It's 56 parts. Okay, and mass of sulfur 32 parts. Is that clear? And therefore what would be the mass of iron sulfide? It would be 88. Okay, so you see the mass of the product is 88, and if you add the mass of the reactants, that is 56 and 32, it comes to 88. Therefore 88 equals to 88, and hence the law of conservation of mass is proved. Now let's see an example. A sealed tube containing phosphorus was weighed and heated carefully to initiate complete burning of phosphorus. When the reaction was completed, the tube was cooled and reweighed. What was observed? That no change in weight was detected before or after the experiment. So, what can we see from here? A sealed tube containing phosphorus was first weighed. So the initial weight, suppose the initial weight was A, and the outcome which came after heating the sealed tube came to B. Okay, so we can't now measure the temperature, we can't now measure the weights A and B because the temperature is not same. You get it? If the temperature is not same, this part that they have to be provided the masses are measured under similar conditions. So if the temperature increases or decreases, they would not remain in similar conditions. So after heating, they have to be cooled again to the weight which was its previous temperature, and then again reweigh. So after this, we had seen that no change in weight was detected before and after the experiment. Okay. Now see one more example to specify the law of conservation of mass in case of a double decomposition reaction. Okay. What kind of a reaction was this? Can anyone tell? That information of iron sulfide by heating iron and sulfur. If anyone can tell, write in the comment box. Okay. See, now comes in a double decomposition reaction. Two solutions of sodium chloride and silver nitrate were taken in two limbs of U-shaped tube and limbs sealed. The tube was then weighed and then tilted to mix the solutions. So first we weigh the tube as soon as both the solutions are kept in the U-shaped tube. Then we shake the bottle to mix both the solutions, and again the U-shaped tube is weighed. Now what do we see over here? Sodium chloride reacts with silver nitrate and a precipitate of silver chloride is formed. The tube is then reweighed. The weight, what is the conclusion we get over here? The weight before and after the experiment remained the same. Okay, so let's see over here NaCl. So sodium's mass is 23 and chlorine is 35.5. So it would come 58.5. Okay, and from here silver nitrate we get silver is 108 grams, so nitrogen is 14 and oxygen is 48. So the total weight of the reactions, the total mass of reactants is 228.5. And now what comes the total mass of products? See, 228.5. Therefore, we see that the total mass of reactants is equal to the total mass of products. Now remember this experiment would succeed only and only if the temperature and pressure remain the same. Okay. Now see, let's see some experiments. Solutions of lead acetate and sodium sulfate were mixed. Okay, So now you can calculate both these, the total mass of the product and total mass of the reactants, and see whether these are coming equal or not. And if these are coming equal, hence we can state that in a chemical change matter is neither created nor destroyed, but there is a simple transformation of material substances. Okay, hence law of conservation of mass is also called law of conservation of matter. Okay, now what are the limitations? Let's see. During chemical reactions, energy is evolved in the form of heat and light, etc. It is a chemical energy stored up in the reactants which is released. See, some spare products would always be included in chemical reactions. Okay, whenever you are heating, heat is also produced, and some light energy is also produced. So you have to, in such a position, you have always to keep the things in constant temperature and pressure, but it is not possible in practical terms. Okay, so this can only be done in some professional laboratories and not in our school laboratories which we have. So I don't think so your teachers would deal with all these. Only you just need to know that under the whenever the temperature and pressure remain constant, and these are the masses are calculated under similar conditions, then only the law of conservation of mass would prove to be correct. Okay, hence some mass which is extremely small is converted into energy. Therefore a small see, in the general cases, all the total mass of products is always less than the total mass of reactants. Okay, because some amount of energy is released as in the form of heat, and some is lost in the form of light, and many other such waste of energy is there. So some mass which is extremely small is converted into energy, and therefore the law of conservation of mass will not strictly be valid unless and until mass and energy are considered together. Okay, considering conservation of mass and conservation of energy as two aspects of one law. Okay, the law could be also considered as total quantity of mass and energy remain constant throughout in a chemical reaction. The above law is in agreement with Dalton's atomic theory, in which atoms retain their individuality and are not created or destroyed. Okay, Dalton's atomic theory tells us that atoms are neither created nor destroyed. Okay, and if we transfer the law of conservation of mass, then we have to tell total quantity of mass and energy remain constant throughout in a chemical reaction. Okay, so let's have a small now let's have a small brief over here. So we learned today what is chemistry. Listen, I am telling you all the basic points which you need to memorize for your exams, and all the other parts you might leave just by reading, as they are not so important and would not be asked in a question paper. So see, what is chemistry? You need to learn this by heart. Okay, then all these brief history of chemistry is not that much required. Only this, the last point, what the atom is dealt with, it's important. And just you need to know the definition of the basic divisions of chemistry, and nothing much. And the definition of matter is very crucial in this chapter. You need to I told you in the beginning of this lesson, you need to remember the three basic points while defining matter. The three basic points are: occupies space, has mass, and can be perceived by our senses. Okay, now you need to learn the characteristics of matter. In the book it is given in paragraphs, but if you write in points in the examination paper, you would fetch more marks, and the examiner who is checking your paper would also get impressed. And now the solids, liquids and gases, if you find difficulty in learning in this way, you might even make columns of differences between solids, liquids and gases. It would be more helpful for you all, and if you want them, you can even ask me in the comment box. Okay, and now here we learned what is the kinetic theory of matter, interparticle space, interparticle attraction and kinetic energy and potential energy. I also told you a brief tip how to learn kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy always includes movement or motion, and potential energy is always stationary, stagnant. Okay. Now here comes what are the differences in interparticle space and interparticle attraction of solids, liquids and gases. I hope you understand, all of you understood this part. And now comes the change of state of matter, melting. Remember guys, you need to understand these parts and also learn the definition by heart. Okay, and include all the points at a particular temperature, solid state to liquid state, melting. Okay, you can't use any other word, melting or fusion. Okay, and here comes the liquid state to solid state. This one is solidification or freezing. Here comes the liquid state to gaseous state, vaporization or evaporation. You might even write evaporation. You would not, the teacher would not cut your marks. Okay, now here comes condensation, gaseous state to liquid state, condensation or liquefaction. Okay, now sublimation, you need to by heart this definition and see the examples. Ammonium chloride, iodine, camphor, 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 naphthalene, Naphthalene, naphthalene. Okay. Remember here, sublimation is always in the absence of heat. Okay, it does not require heat. Now, here comes the John Dalton's atomic theory, and here comes Lavoisier, how he formulated the law of given by Dalton on basis of experimental evidence. Okay, and I had asked you a question. What is this reaction? What is the type of reaction involved over here? 56 parts of Fe and 32 parts of sulfur gives you 88 parts of FeS. Let me know the answer in the comment box. Okay. Now you got to know the definite limitations of the Dalton's atomic theory. Okay. Remember this point mainly, that some part of the energy is involved in the form of heat and light. It's evolved in the form of heat and light, and considering the conservation of mass and conservation of energy as two aspects of one law. Okay, therefore the total quantity of mass and energy remain constant throughout in a chemical reaction. Okay, so if you have any doubt regarding this chapter, you will ask me in the comment section, or you might even send me questions and queries or doubts in my Telegram ID, that is Coelsina. Okay, and that's all for today's class. If any doubts, let me know in the comment. And I had asked you two questions in this class. First was what type of reaction is in this part, and what are the total mass of products and reactants in the given experiments given over here. Okay, so you have to give the answer in the comment box. Okay, so that's all for today's class. Thank you.